Today I'm joined with Aaron Saluk.
Hey, how's it going?
We're going to be talking about indie game dev and very interested in hearing about your experiences developing your game.
There's a
What's
lot of experiences.
so? What's your game all about?
So it's a turn-based strategy game, sort of turn-based strategy light. It has progression elements. It has a lot of the things you'd expect, but I made it sort of more bite-sized. The idea being I wanted it to be a little bit more approachable for people who may not know much about the genre, but people who like things like chess or checkers or something like that that exist on a grid-based board. Um, but I did create some depth to it so that you can customize characters and level them up and stuff like that for nerds like me who basically love to just OP characters left and right because that's the fun part of it.
Exactly, exactly. So, what are some of the tricks that you're doing to kind of bridge that gap between the novice and the more advanced player like yourself?
So the interface is very minimal. And one reason I did that was because the first version of the game that's available on iOS, Rampart Tactics, I should probably say the name of it, and the iOS App Store, it's Rampart Tactics AR. It's an AR game on the iPhone, and the idea being I didn't want the screen to be like super cluttered with buttons and menus and interfaces. So I tried to make it as natural and as intuitive as possible. The other reason being I tend to like games that have really minimal interfaces. So when you open up the game for the first time, the first match that you play, it's not super hard. It's sort of like an ease you into the experience kind of thing. And it's really just the fun and the excitement of like moving the characters on the game board and seeing them march around and what they can do and what they can't do. And as far as moving people from the beginner side to the novice side, when you finally beat that first match, something pops up on the screen saying you won some runes. And runes are sort of where the depth of the game comes in because they allow you to basically equip character buffs. And they're randomly generated as far as the runes go. There's like a total of, I believe, 28 runes, and you get them totally based on like random draw. It's one of the only things in the game, though, that is a random draw, which is kind of one thing that separates it from a lot of strategy games. If you can hit a character, you will hit them. So there's no real dodge sort of setup. What I did do is there's a defend sort of setup. So you have a defense bar. Everyone starts off with one, and then if you use extra runes, you can make it 2 or 3 or 4 or so on. And that actually plays into the math of how much damage you receive when someone attacks you. So it's based on simple whole numbers, but I found that games with simple whole numbers can be really interesting when you start to extrapolate that outwards. So it's kind of like a Dragon Quest in that you start off really simple, start off really basic. You do 2 damage or 3 damage or something, but it scales up nicely.
So, how do you test your gameplay mechanics? Like, I know that can be tricky to really tune those things in.
I have a secret weapon, my mom.
Really?
if,
She's a
if
gamer?
mom can understand it, she's not, which is why it's
Oh,
perfect.
oh,
if
brilliant.
if she can understand it and she can sort of see how it's working and sort of intuitively get a sense of it, I know I'm going in the right direction. Um, Beyond that, I mean, I have other friends and family who I can certainly ask and they'll play it for me. But I really like to use my mom because she does not like playing games at all. So she's always like a fresh audience no matter what, which is really nice.
So, what was it like the first time you gave her the game?
Well, she didn't quite know what augmented reality was. And I kept trying to like explain it, but there's no way to explain it to somebody who's never experienced it. So I handed her a version of the game that was playing on the iPad. I said, okay, the game is right over there on the floor. And she kind of looked at me quizzically, like, really? I was like, just look through the iPad. And she saw it. And it was that like face lighting up, the whole magic of the moment thing. I was like, yeah, I'm onto something here. All right, good.
Oh, neat. So, were there any unique challenges because it is an AR game, like in as far as development?
Yes. So specifically when you're doing a lot of prototyping of the early game, the way it works with the Unreal Engine, which is the engine I'm currently using, you can't really test augmented reality features unless you build to the device. So you end up doing all of your bug checking and all of that stuff on the device, which slows down the time when you're just kind of like hashing out basic gameplay mechanics and stuff like that. It was definitely longer than if I built it on Windows first and then ported it over to iOS. But my focus really was the augmented reality part to start with.
And so, when you launched your game, like, was there any tricks that you used to promote it and get the word out?
I sure tried.
Sure tried.
I mean, I have a Twitter that I started basically a week before I put it out there, which was a bad idea. Definitely have a Twitter in advance. But I've always used Instagram as a way of posting works in progress. And that's how I got a lot of people who are other indie game developers and stuff, at least, if not excited, aware of it and the fact that I was making it. I will say, though, I really did not do a great lead up as far as like PR or marketing. And that's something that I think a lot of indie game developers struggle with, because that is a really time consuming, like, behemoth all its own.
It's kind of hard to cut through the noise, isn't it?
Absolutely. And there's so many games, and there's so many good games that are coming out. And the reality is, everyone's sort of fighting for the same screen time. And it's sort of a privilege if somebody allows you to have some of theirs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So going back to the game, I realized there's a couple things about it I missed or didn't ask. So is it solo play and multiplayer, or just solo?
It's both.
Okay.
So there's a solo campaign. It's sort of like 25 challenges that scale upwards with a suggested character level. So you get to pick 5 characters for each match. And this sort of like tells like they should be like level 2 or level 3 or something. But I'm most proud of the multiplayer. And that was the biggest feature I actually built, the thing that took the most time to actually get going. Because it wasn't just multiplayer, it was how do I set up sort of a staggered multiplayer locally over Wi-Fi with 2 different iPhones sort of pointing in the same space, but they can't talk to each other except through the Wi-Fi.
So do you have trouble with the graphics orienting correctly, or is there any challenges?
No, because I made such a simple, I hate to say this word, but dummy-proof way of doing it. Excellent. So you actually place the map yourself. So it scans the floor and sort of a guide shows up with like a north arrow, and you can scale it and move it around, the floor, and basically put it where you want it. And then you just tell your friend like, hey, the arrow is pointing towards the window, or hey, the arrow is pointing towards the bookcase, or what have you.
Great
it's not super techy. It's like super simple, super basic, but it does work well.
So have you worked in the games industry before?
No. I applied for a few jobs right after I worked in film, but at that point, it was still like a really closed business as far as exposure to game engines and stuff. That was the first question you always got asked. Have you used a game engine? And for most people, it's like, no, you have one. I don't. But it was shortly after that Unity 3D really took off. So I don't use that engine now, but I will say they did a huge service for a lot of people like me who we were looking for a way to get exposure and to get the experience of using a game engine, but we couldn't have access at that point to like the private engines that companies were making sort of behind the scenes.
So what was the trade-offs choosing between Unity and Unreal? What attracted you to Unreal?
So at the point where I was building one project called Hipster Town Tactics, which I put on Greenlight, didn't get greenlit, so I kind of like let that slide. But I hit this huge engine bug. And this has only ever happened on Unity. And it was they were doing a lot of work behind the scenes to fix the stability issues. And whenever you hear that in every single monthly update, and you get these like literally updates every 3 weeks, the build that you're working with ends up being slightly unstable. So I wanted to make sure my game was forward-facing, that it would work with future versions of the engine, and it just broke to pieces. And it looked like a lot of the mechanics I built in, the core code I was using just completely was gone, and there was no way to get it back. So I had to bail on that project, unfortunately. I really liked that project, but it just seemed like their engine was under so much change constantly at that point. And this is also when the new GUI system was being constantly like put 6 months away. It'll be ready in December, it'll be ready in June, it'll be ready next December. So after about a year of that, I realized I can't work with an engine that's not done yet. So shortly after that, Epic came out with the Unreal Engine. That was when it was a subscription service still. And then they made it free. And I was like, well, I've got to try it. I've got to at least try it out. And I got to say, it is a lot more stable in my experience. and having the C++ access really helps.
Yep, yep. Well, cool. Is there any last thoughts before we wrap this up? How can people find you?
Oh yeah, so on Instagram, it's just my name at Aaron Saluk, AARONSALUK. Same on Twitter, same pretty much everywhere. I'm not on Facebook though. I got off of Facebook a while ago. But yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. I think I'm the only Aaron Saluk in the world, unfortunately. There's not many of us.
Did, as long as I call you by the right name, when we started the video the first time, didn't I call you Tom Saluk?
Alan.
Alan.
And there is an Alan Saluk, and he's
All right.
a well-known, I think he's a physicist or something. So
All right, don't get confused. Aaron Saluk. All right.
that's right.
Well, thanks for taking a few minutes to talk with me today.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.